Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about a really, really crucial part of our overall philosophy and our training, and that's the bowling conditioning work. Because no matter if you're trying to change technique or you're coming back from rehab or fitness work, bowling conditioning is the bridge between training and playing, which is so crucial. Okay, so let's take a dive in. So, like I said, I think this is the missing link. It really is. If we're looking to improve bowling, fitness work, technical work, there needs to be a synergy between the two. They aren't two separate entities. In what we see so many times are people come on and say, "Yeah, I'm training really hard, doing, I'm in the gym, and then I'm bowling as well." Two like separate pathways, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be at all. If you're trying to do that, you'll probably find out, and you've probably done it before, that you're working hard in the gym, you're getting stronger, you might be running, you might be doing whatever, but your bowling's not improving. And in fact, what we see is it go backwards a lot. Now, we see that so much. We see people bowling so much quicker at 16, 17, 18, and then getting 3 or 4 years of like traditional generic strength work underneath, and suddenly the bowling's gone slower. The body's not moving as well. And when we have this separation between training and playing, that's the sort of things which happen. So when we add the bowling conditioning in, what we see is lasting change. And a lot of it is because we work on the body first, we have to make sure that the body can get into the positions that we need to see during bowling conditioning in order for them to be prevalent in there when you're bowling. Because if we can't get the positions right and we haven't got the range, then there's no point doing the bowling conditioning because we don't get near it. Okay, so when sometimes you might
I'm
be
fine, thank you, baby.
you might be in an early stage of rehab, um, and thinking, oh, I just want to get into the end stuff, then this is the reason why let's not rush it. We need to make sure the body's in the right place. And this is why we test so much and retest to make sure you are ready for the bowling conditioning. Okay. So these are the basic principles. We do an isometric or a flywheel overloaded exercise to start, where we really hone in on our back foot contact position. And this is crucial. This is one of the ways that the bowling conditioning gets messed up really badly is when we're not nailing that back foot contact position. So a lot of people talk about back foot contact and they say, I want to change it. I want to go from side on landing. I want to be front on landing. That's not what we do. You're landing in that position for a reason. Now, if it changes due to our training, that's fine, but we're not trying to enforce a change. So if you land at 0 degrees, which is facing the batter, then that's how we train in the isometric and the overloaded position. If we land at 90 degrees, which is like landing on the crease line, then that is where we train in the isometric and overloaded position. Okay. Obviously, the difference is we're pushing through the ball of the foot and we're having the foot underneath the body. So the base of support underneath the center of mass. So that's the first stage. So already we're thinking not just going to do an exercise, but is my foot position right? Have I got the base of support under the center of mass so I can put through the most load available? Okay. We go from there into more of a plyometric and thinking even more drill. So this can be a back foot pulse with bands on. This could be a pre-turn drill. This could be your medicine ball drills, whatever it is. This is where the thought process really, really starts. So, say here you could go from your isometric back foot contact press for 6 seconds, and then into two different drills. You could do a banded back foot pulse. Again, that back foot contact has to be in the position that you land that back foot in. Otherwise, the transfer is not going to be there. So you could do 10 pulses. Then you could be doing three back foot, double back foot contact hops into pre-turn shot put throw or overhead throw. We'll talk about why you might do either in a second. When we're really, really thinking of nailing that technique, so that what that's doing is telling the brain, these are the positions I want to see when bowling because they're the best positions to help me have the most amount of stability and balance. And when I have those two things, I can produce power because the body's not worrying that you're in a position it's got to protect you from. Okay. So those first set of drills, we're thinking all the time, am I in a position? Let's nail that position. And then from there, we then bowl. We then bowl. We don't think about the position. We don't think about what's happening. We just grab the ball and run in and bowl. Now, the few questions we get on the bowling aspect here, should it be full run or half run, or how should it look? Now, for me, in the winter time, obviously, you're not always going to get your full run up in there. So what we're aiming to do here is number one, bowl at least 70% intensity. Now, we've done a whole video on why we don't do walkthroughs. So if you're confused about that, go and have a little look at that video. But it's crucial we're at least 70%, whether that's half run, full run, whatever it might be. Now, if you are at a half run, all we're thinking of is maintaining your speed through the crease, not trying. Okay, the difference for me between a half run and a full run is just the ability to maintain more of a momentum. So we've got more room to accelerate and then keep that acceleration through the crease. It's never about trying harder. Remember that. We're working on the sequencing of the body, the kinetic chain, the hip shoulder separation, and we're working on that in the drills before. Once we get the ball in our hand, then we bowl. Now, normally with a bowling conditioning session, it would be 3 deliveries, but that can be manipulated as well. Say we're working on a impulse drill with the impulse pad, and sometimes then you go away from that and it doesn't feel the same. What we can do with that is if one week you're doing 3 balls with the impulse, the next week you can do 2 impulse, 1 without. The next week you can do 1 impulse, 2 without. Okay, so we're always manipulating it. Maybe you've had a really high load of bowling. In that case, instead of doing 3 deliveries with each set, you just do 1. So instead of, say, 5 or 6 overs in the session, you do 1.5 to 2. Okay, so quite a big difference. So we can actually go in and change and tinker with this quite a lot. So there's a lot of freedom, but the principles always remain the same. So things to think about, okay? The intensity. What are the goals? Nothing below 70%. And I would say 70% is our lowest, and that would be someone who's coming back from an ACL, a stress fracture, a shoulder injury, whatever it might be, we would start them around 70%. But in the main, if you're doing this and you're fine, I pretty much want match intensity bowling. Okay? Match intensity bowling, that's the key. So it's always got to be around there. The key thing for me is never drop below that. Never drop below that. Then the mechanics. Are we getting the positions? Okay. Without positioning, we won't transfer. The body won't recognize what you're doing. So it's key we get in those right positions with that back foot. And again, going back to what I said earlier, this is exactly why we have to have the body working well to start before we can get into this. Otherwise, it's a waste of time because there's going to be roadblocks everywhere, excuse me, and it won't come through. And then loads, again, as I just spoke about with the loads in season or out of season. So this can be done twice or whenever you need it to. Do we need to do 3 balls or just 1 ball, 2 balls, whatever it might be? That's easily manipulated. But just make sure if you've bowled 30 overs in a week and you then have a bowling conditioning session, you're not then adding to it and then got a net session adding again. So we've got to be really smart with that. Okay, so let's have a little thing about how this looks in practice before we go on to the videos. So we need to use this as the base, okay, and then integrate other bowling around it. So again, if we're in a rehab phase and we're getting back to bowling, The bowling conditioning is the first part of this, always. And it might look something like this, okay, as a rough outline. So if you'll come back from a stress eat and we've ticked everything else off and we're back to needing to bowl, again, we've done videos on back to bowling rehab, but this is just being ultra specific to bowling conditioning. It might look like this for an eight week split. We do two, or maybe even the first week we do one bowling conditioning session. So that's around 6 overs, 5, 6 overs. The next week, in the next 2 weeks, we do two bowling conditioning sessions. So then we're around about between 10 to 12 overs. Then the week after, if everything's going well, we might do bowling conditioning sessions. And then away from that, warm up like we would do in a game and do 5 overs to an empty net, something like that. So we start to, again, get away from the stabilizers, so to speak, with bowling conditioning into bowling. But this is only if we're ready for it and we've come through that first 3 weeks okay. Now, the big things here are what we can do with the two bowling conditioning sessions is take the load down. So instead of 3 balls in both of those two sessions, there might be 2 balls each time, so that it just makes a way for us to bowl 5 overs. But crucially, when we're in this phase, that 5 overs can't be 5 overs of walkthroughs or 50%. That's 5 overs, 75 to 80%. So for me, 85 to 90% is probably match intensity. So we're getting close to that. And then we could do that for 2 weeks. If we're happy and everything's working well, then we could be down to one bowl and conditioning and two nets. And then one of those could be at batters. Okay, then the next week, the two nets could be at batters. Then we could be into 3 nets or 2 nets for batters and one bowling conditioning session. Okay, but the big issues that we see when people mess up is they might do a couple of bowling conditioning sessions and then just start bowling at batters. They think, well, no, I'm bowling now, so I can just bowl at batters. And again, we talk about how that it's like having the stabilizers on, and we need it. That's why we sort of wean off it, but to make sure that we're telling the body time and time again, these are going to be the positions which, one, keep us away from injury, two, help increase the pace, and three, help with the consistency of how it's coming out, which is all three things that we desperately want. Where people mess up, like I said, is they bin this off and they just start bowling at batters too much and they lose it and we don't see the transfer. Okay, so let's have a little look a session I did with a bowler, and this was a knee dom bowler who we're working a lot on the pre-turn with. So let's just have a little look. So he had to keep correcting that back foot in that position. Okay, so let's go back and have a little look at that. So watch his back foot. He keeps sort of coming round and then trying to reset it, which is fine, as long as we're thinking about doing that.
Again with ease. Snap, snap, snap.
So then we went into a deliberate pre-turn, okay, to really focus.
Boom. Good. Good intent. Good intent.
See what I'm saying there? Intent.
Shoulder back. Beautiful.
I want the intent. And we'll talk a little bit about why we're doing the shot put position as well, which for knee doms who struggle with pre-turn, I think is big. And then we go into a double foot hop and really try and nail that pre-turn round. So a couple needed to be snappier. He nailed that last one. So from there, he went and picked up a ball and bowled 3 balls. And the changes we saw were big. Now, a lot of people ask about hip and knee dom. So for me, this is sort of where it matters. So this is Charlie. Obviously, you all know Moz. And these are some of the exercises we did with Moz around the same sort of thing, but he was more of a hip dom. So starting out with an isometric position and the feet are forward. Okay, now obviously this one is a bit more of a front foot contact, but you can see that if he was doing a back foot contact press, isometric press, that back foot would be in the same position. Okay, and then into more of a little bit of a plyometric one, again, the feet landing in the same sort of position, and then overloading it, but just look at the feet position. Okay, so the difference between that and Ed, who was on the previous video, obviously Ed were really nailing that pre-turn, Charlie hip dom, and that's how his back foot landed front on. Okay, So they're the main differences. If Charlie was working like Ed and Ed was working like Charlie, they wouldn't get anywhere near the results they could get. Okay, and Charlie was the first person we put through this at Worcester with me back in 2018. His results were absolutely phenomenal, phenomenal, and that's the basis of what you guys do now with us. Obviously, it's changed and it's evolved, but this was just to tell you different. So when people ask about hip and knee dom, for me, I ask them quite a lot, well, why does it matter for you? How does it change how you're going to do something? For me, this is when it does matter, when we're trying to really nail the bowling conditioning and hit the positions that we need to. Okay. So key takeaways here. Understand the reasons you're doing it. Hopefully, we've covered a lot of that, but it's not just for the sake of doing a session. Everything we're doing in the three drills before, or two or three drills before we bowl, is about then going over and transferring to your bowling. Do not just bowl. Okay, that's not going to be the way that you succeed. Just doing one bowling conditioning session and think you're back and going away and bowling and bowling and bowling, which we see far too much of, is going to limit your improvements massively. Massively. Okay. Then also know when to think and when just to bowl. Two different things. We're thinking first drill, we're thinking second drill, we're thinking third drill, we're switching off the brain and then bowling. And we need to have that as close together as possible. We've had people before say, I can do the drills in the gym and then go and bowl tonight. No point. Not going to transfer. Going to get nowhere near transferring. So then it's about in the winter, how can you do it? So, we didn't have great facilities at Worcester. So in the gym, I'd put the plyo boxes up and the boys would only have to have literally 4 or 5 steps and bowl into the plyo boxes. Or at some of the gyms, we'd use a squash court and take the medicine ball there, take a skipping rope there, take aquabag there and try and do some overloaded stuff, isometric work, whatever it might be. But they can be two separate entities. Okay. But let me just go back and just talk a little bit about the positions of getting into the knee dom and why
Really deliberate again with these.
I like the ball into the shot put position. Because when it's overhead, what we
Yes.
find is the bowlers
Boom.
struggle
Good. Good intent. Good intent.
to get that sort of 90
Keep that
degrees with the
shoulder
back
back.
foot.
Good.
It always starts to come forward. But when it's in the shot put, we can load it up and help really create that hip shoulder separation by holding the ball back there. Okay, so if you're doing overhead and you're looking down on your video and you see that the ball pretty much or the foot is facing forward instead of the side on the way you land, then go into the pre-turn and the shot put is far more effective. Okay, so any questions, guys?